What I want to know is how does one get involved in doing rock work as a woman? Do you really, really want to know? Or do you just want the rehearsed response that I always give? What would happen if we chose to really tell the truth about ourselves? Like if we really, really just told the real truth of our lives? I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that it's my truth.
You're listening to Hammered.
Why would anybody choose to go down a road that is destructive or scary or devastating? It's not like you wake up one morning and decide, I think I'm going to go have a real crazy fucking chaotic life. But telling the truth faster is sort of an invitation. And so this particular experience or journey or story, whatever you want to call this, is about a reckoning. It's about putting my life, under a microscope and really looking at the patterns and the choices, like throwing a rock into a lake and this ripple effect, and seeing those little ripples and how one or two choices can determine a destiny that is just bizarre. I was having a lot of feelings about leaving my ice cream route. Mainly those little kids kept flashing through my mind on the drive down to Tampa. I'd gotten pretty used to blocking out bad feelings. I could tune it out and say to myself, I'll think about that later, kind of the old Scarlett O'Hara, I won't worry about that today, I'll worry about that tomorrow kind of thing. And I was just really, my heart was just hurting about these kids. And I kept thinking about Butch, waiting for me with his little bowl haircut, his little bangs and dum-dum-dum-dum, I want that, and never having enough money to get that. And then the little girl with the wine glass, Shonky Yonky, a little girl that I named. I would turn in the trailer park and they would come running, and she was the cutest little thing. She was like a 3-year-old Lucy Lawless, Xena warrior princess, and green eyes instead of blue. And I would say, Shonky, Yonky, 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 and she would laugh, and the big sister would laugh, and she became like a little mascot, and the kids would almost push her into the front of the crowd of kids because she was so adorable, and she had this little dirty face and just, ragged clothes, but these eyes, and she just captivated me with her sadness and her little spirit. And she always had a little penny in her hand. And I didn't have anything that cost a penny. And all the kids would laugh because she'd open her hand. I'd say, what do you have in your hand? She'd have a penny. And they would laugh, and I would always give her something. And the lady, in Liberty Heights that bred quiche-hound dogs, puppies, and she was kind of chubby, and her 2 daughters were chubby, and they'd stand out there and talk and talk and talk about these puppies, and then she'd tell me about her marital problems and things like that. But really nice woman. And then the 2 boys that had this little short dog that was like half corgi. The body was like a corgi and the head was like a German shepherd. It was like the strangest looking dog, and its name was Daisy. And they'd buy it an ice cream sandwich, which I don't think that was very good for the dog, but I think it lived a pretty long time. The girls at the T-shirt screen printing place had become kind of friends, and then Ronnie, this beautiful, sexy black man that I actually took to Stevie Nicks after Ann #1 stood me up after I'd camped out for the tickets. We got a laugh out of him being the only black man at the concert. He kept saying, "What am I doing at this white people concert?" And the only other black people were the workers at the Omni, and they were kind of looking at him like, "Brother, what you doing at this white woman show?" And it was kind of funny. So when we got to Tampa, the first thing I noticed, there was an orange tree and a lemon tree in the backyard. And that was so exciting to me. I'd never seen that in person. And so Regina and I began to set up house because we're the girls. And she had some really great things. You know, she had nice furniture and art and pretty cool stuff. And so, you know, we kind of set up house, and Dawn was at the shop, the new shop, which we only went to about once or twice to kind of look at it. But we were so young, we didn't have any experience in building out of space or construction or anything like that. We were just kind of like, well, when you get it ready, let us know, you know, Dave and I and Bill. And so Regina would drink coffee, smoke cigarettes, and put puzzles together. And I always wondered, why is she always putting a puzzle together? And I thought, well, she'd say, why don't you just try it and shut up? And I would put together puzzles with her. And I kind of got a safe feeling with her. And she would say things like, Jill, do you want a cup of coffee? And I'd go, yeah. And she'd go, good. Why don't you go get us one? And you can't drive my car. And oh my God, I would take my motorcycle, go down to the convenience store, and come back with 2 cups of coffee between my legs. And I had gotten pretty good at riding the motorcycle and transporting my beer around, so I could balance a couple of cups of coffee. So we were sort of waiting during this time period for our bonus checks. And it was late fall in Tampa. So it was warm. It wasn't hot, but it was pretty good weather. And so Dave and I had not spoken since the knockdown drag out. And I was determined that I was just going to freeze him out, and I would have to cope with this however I could. So I had my own bedroom with cranberry, and back on the floor, the water beds at the condo, all that furniture was actually Don's, which wasn't even his. He was actually renting it from one of those like sleazy furniture rental places. So I guess he had to turn that in. I don't really know what all happened with that, but I was back sleeping in the floor, and Dave was across the hall in a bedroom, and Bill was actually on the couch, and Regina and Don had a bedroom. But we began to just kind of have this little home life, which was weird. And I was in my room one day, and Dave came to the door, and he had a cigar box full of change, and he shook it, and he kind of smiled, and he said, do you want to go get some beer? And he knew that that would be the hook for me. And I hadn't had anything since I'd been down there. I was really trying to like straighten up my act because of that huge, horrible thing that had happened. And I had that adrenaline shoot through my body. And I said, yes. He goes, I can get Don's car. And so he got Don's yellow Monte Carlo with a black vinyl top, black vinyl seats. And we went on and we bought some beer, and we bought a styrofoam cooler, and we went to the beach in Clearwater. And we laid on the beach, and we talked, and we drank, and we sort of started making up. And feeling apologetic, and I'm taking the blame, he's taking the blame, and we're going through this whole thing all day started getting dusk, and we went to the liquor store and we got a big half-gallon of vodka and a bottle of cranberry juice. Then we built a fire on the beach. We proceeded to get drunker and drunker, and then we proceeded to take our clothes off, get in the ocean in the dark, go skinny dipping, and we had this fire, and it was just this like powerful, romantic sort of makeup kind of weird encounter. And all of a sudden he gets down on his knees and he tells me that he loves me and he asks me to marry him. And 4 trillion things start running through my mind. Oh my God, if I marry him, then I won't be gay anymore. It'll cure me. It'll get me out of this turmoil. I can just be a regular person. I'll just be straight. Just say yes. Just say yes. You can do it. Just get rid of all this other stuff and let it go and just say yes. And so I looked at him in my drunkenness and I said, yes, I'll marry you. And then I woke up in the sand, face down, sand in my mouth, hot sun beating down on my face. And I started seeing people start coming to the beach like it's morning time. And I'm just mortified. And I jump and I start putting my clothes on. We're getting dressed. We got to get the hell out of here. I'm just sick again. When we get back and I pull Bill to the side and I tell him everything. And he's like, oh, God. He's like, oh, my God. I said, you got to help me. So he actually had a talk with Dave. I think he might have actually had a good talk with him and try to convince him to just back off of me and let's just focus on kind of getting together this ice cream shop. And so then we all started kind of playing around, me, Dave, Bill, and Regina, and we had a fashion show where Dave and Bill dressed in drag and put on Regina's makeup, and that was kind of weird and fucked up, but we laughed, and we actually got Regina to go out to a bar with us, which was kind of funny. And looking back on it, I feel horrible because I know how hard she tried not to drink, and she actually had a couple of glasses of wine, and something inside of me, it made me nervous. There's something inside of me that made me nervous, and I knew I should not influence her or try to convince her to drink anything. But I just, you just have so many layers of denial that can kick in and make everything okay. No matter how bad it is or how bad you think it might become, you can just switch it. And then we had to go and have dinner. Stuart was coming down, oh Lord, and Don and y'all, the big boss is coming from Kansas City, the big boss, the founder. His name was Connie, a man named Connie. Well, he was basically like the mob leader from what I gathered. And we go to dinner in this nice restaurant, like really fancy. And, we were like pretty ragged in our clothing, but we showed up and we sat in this like VIP kind of dining room. And Connie, had on those kind of glasses that turn dark, and they look like sunglasses at night. And he was saying things to us like, you kids are doing a good job down here, and I got a lot of expectations. I'm putting a lot on the line for you, and get the lobster, get anything you want on the menu, get the lobster. And I'd never had lobster before, so I got the surf and turf. I got me a steak and lobster, and I thought I was really in a fancy environment. And, the mind can trick you. And it was like I felt like I had made it, and I was going to be turning 21 in a couple of weeks. And I was like, wow, I'm having dinner at this nice place with this like important man. my 21st birthday rolls around, and I remember buying a bottle of Two Fingers tequila. I really just liked the black bottle. It was like a black matte finish bottle. And I remember sitting at the table with Dave and Bill, and I was drinking some shots, and I told Bill I was going to a bar, and he goes, well, I'm going with you. And I kept saying, well, I'm 21 with a bullet. And Dave wanted to go, and we said, no, you can't go. So Bill and I took a cab, and we went to this bar called Renee's in Tampa. And Bill was always making jokes to Dave about the Gallus. He would say, oh, you can always go down to the Gallus to make some extra money. And the Gallus was a restaurant / bar in Atlanta on Cypress Street. And it was this old, like kind of weird Victorian house built in the late 1800s. And it'd been like a house for women during the war that were helping with the war. And then it became a funeral home. And then it became this like crazy gay piano bar, fine dining establishment upstairs, and then downstairs was like a cruise bar. And I think that's what Bill was always referring to, was the downstairs. But the upstairs was, fresh linens and fresh flowers and kind of fancy. And he and I actually went there one night to have dinner, and I just remember how weird I thought it was. And the downstairs was actually just a hustling kind of bar, and I kept trying to put it together, like, why is Bill so infatuated with the Gallus? He talks about it a lot. And there was a talk of a virus, and there was talk of men starting to get sick, and I didn't really apply it at all, because it was kind of like gay men were getting like this flu, and there was just a little bit of talk about it, but nothing too spectacular to worry about. And I had mostly gone to gay women's bars, the Tower Lounge, the Sports Page, Tallulah's, Dina's One Mo Time, Arnie's. These were all Atlanta gay bars. Well, anyway, we walk into Renee's, and this is a Tampa place. And the reason I wanted to go there was they were having a drag show, and it was actually Charlie Brown's Cabaret from Atlanta that was in Tampa. I thought, well, how ironic. And, it was the usual suspects. I think it was like Amber Richards and Heather Daniels and Lily White and Kitty Litter and these drag queens. And so I dressed for my birthday. I wore a pair of ragged Levi's, and I wore a Levi's vest. And that was it. And took my bottle of tequila into the bar. And I remember leaning on a post, like a pole. And Bill was at the bar, and I was kind of watching the drag show. And this girl came up to me, and she whispered in my ear, and she said, do you want to go to a party? And I looked at her, and I'm like, sure. And I was pretty half tanked, and Bill's kind of looking at me like, who are you talking to? And I kind of took Bill in a way to sort of, I think on an unconscious level, I took him to sort of help me or take care of me so I wouldn't get in any trouble. And so next thing I know, this dancer from Space Odyssey 2001, she gets us a cab. Bill gets in the front seat with the cab driver, and I'm in the back with this dancer. Well, Bill kept turning around in his seat and looking at me and trying to get my attention. He was pointing, and he was saying, look at her face. And I'd look at one side of her face, and it was fine. Well, finally she turned, and in the street lights, it was like she had this huge scab on her other side of her face, like somebody had drug her across the parking lot or something. And so, of course, we go with her. We have no idea where we're going. And then we get to this back of this building, and we pull up, and the cab lets us out. And we go up to this door, and this, guy kind of opens up a little window. And I guess it was kind of a members only joint, and we go in, and all I remember is I started walking around, and somewhere along the way, I lost her and I lost Bill, and I saw like a popcorn machine, and I saw like a hot dog rotisserie machine, like you see at a convenience store, kind of gross hot dogs turning. And then there would be like these different rooms, and I would open a room and it would be dark, but I would see like wadded up Kleenex in the floor, and I could hear human sounds. And I would shut the door, and I went to another door, and I opened the door, and there were people sitting around, and there was somebody shooting up in their arm with a needle. And I shut the door, and I ran away from that door, and I went to another door, and I kept seeing all these like really weird, interesting, and all of a sudden the song, "What's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?" It started running through my mind like a mantra, and it was over and over and over, and it was getting louder and louder, and I could not get out. I could not find Bill, and I had to get out of here. And I couldn't find a door out. Every door I went to, there was something crazier. And finally I opened this back door, and there was a policeman walking under the street light. And it reminded me of that poster of Father Karras in The Exorcist under the street light. And I said, "Hey!" And he turned, and I go, "Hey!" And he goes, "Yeah?" I go, "Can you take me home?" And he goes, "Where do you live?" And I said, "West Hannah Boulevard." I didn't know my street address. I didn't know the number, but I knew that name. He goes, "Yeah, come on." And I came out, and I got in the police car with him in the front seat. And he took me home, and I got there, and before I got out of the car, he looked at me and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Yeah." And I started crying. I said, "It's my birthday." He goes, "How old are you?" I said, 21. He goes, "Well, you go on and you take it easy, okay?" And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Please take care of yourself." And I got out, and I went in the house, and I passed out. Well, the next day I was in this panic. I was in a pure panic. And so I got out in the shed. There was a shed behind this house. And I got out the lawnmower and the lawn equipment, and I cleaned the yard up, and I was down on my hands and knees, and I was edging the centipede grass off of the curb. And I hadn't seen Bill. I had no idea where Bill was. He didn't come home. And it was probably around 3:00 in the afternoon, and I was hungover, but I was trying to not drink and not smoke. I was gonna stop. I was making these deals with God, because see, I knew when I saw that needle, and I saw that needle going into that arm, I knew that I was gonna do that. I knew that that was gonna happen to me against my will, because I had no boundaries and I couldn't say no, and it scared me. And I was like that Alice in Wonderland, and I was trying so hard to get out of that maze, and I could not get out. And I was down on my hands and knees, and I was pulling this grass, and I was frantically trying to work this anxiety out of my body. And all of a sudden I hear, "You old whore." And I look down the street, and it's Bill coming down the street walking. And he kept saying, "You old whore," laughing with his crooked grin and his little hook nose. And I adored him. And here he comes. He's wearing my clothes, my oatmeal-colored Levi corduroy jeans, and my bone-colored Fry harness boots, and my paisley shirt. And he came up, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I knew that Bill had gotten involved in something that night, and I really didn't want to know. And he told me he was really glad that I had left. And I knew that my time was getting real close to having. I knew I was going to have to get away from Bill, and I knew I was going to have to get away from Dave, and I knew I was going to have to get away from Regina and from Don. I felt like I'd just gotten there, and I felt like, well, I've got such a promising future, ha, ha, ha. But there was this other part that was saying, you got to go. You got to get out of here now. And so I went to a payphone and I called Greg, the freezer manager, the John Elway, the hero, the guy, the nice guy. And I said, is there any way that you can come get me? And I just kind of told him that what had been going on, and I was scared. Well, he didn't like Dave, and he didn't like what had happened, and he knew what had happened. And most of the guys sort of sided with Dave, and guys kind of packed together and shit like that. Well, he said he would come, he would borrow a truck, and he would come get me. And I remember the next day sitting with Bill on the couch, and Bill laying his head in my lap and sort of being like a little puppy dog. And I didn't tell him that I was going to leave, but he was hurting. I think he was sick from probably either using some heroin or using something. He'd done something. And he wasn't a huge drinker, but I knew something had gone down with him. And it really scared me for him. And I remember petting his head like a little puppy and his hair. And I remember thinking, you're like my best friend. And you're kind of like a brother that I always wanted. And I'm going to have to leave you. And I planned it where nobody would be at the house. And Greg, the freezer manager, was staying close by. And he stayed in his hotel until I called him and told him the coast was clear. And he came over and he had a truck, and we put my motorcycle in the back of the truck, and we got what little belongings I had. I left just about everything except my clothes, and I even left Cranberry. And I remember walking out and leaving that little kitty cat, and who is now a cat. And I know that Regina would take care of him, but I had become this sort of soulless, sad, not in touch. I could block my feelings and block my emotions, and I was able to walk out of that house and leave that cat behind. And it hurt me, but I got in the truck and we drove on. And I had no idea what was next.
Hammered is recorded and produced in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's narrated by Jill Haynie, produced by Maggie Briggs and Jill Haynie, and with sound design, editing, and music by Alexander Rodriguez. Our beautiful artwork was created by Lauren Caddick, and we'd like to send a special thanks out there to Minnie and Robin. You can check out our website, podcasthammered.com, and follow us on social media for updates.